They say betrayal doesn't always come with a knife. It sometimes comes wrapped in silk and silence, served with champagne and curated nostalgia. Mine arrived in the form of a 36-minute family tribute video where I had been meticulously erased. I sat in the third row of that grand ballroom, posture perfect, hands still, as childhood memories danced across the screen. Birthdays, holidays, lakeside vacations. My father, younger and laughing. My late mother, glowing. Vera, the stepmother who rebranded the family in her own image. And Elle, always Elle, the favored daughter draped in golden light. But I wasn't there. Not a single photo. Not a mention. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. They hadn't forgotten me. They had removed me. Deliberately. Completely. I remembered every one of those moments. The canoe race I won. The lights I strung across the porch. The promises my father made. But in their edited history, I had never existed. As the applause erupted and Vera toasted to family, I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. That was the moment I stopped playing their ghost. I wouldn't be the obedient daughter or the quiet embarrassment anymore. I was the story they tried to bury, and I had come to dig. Walking into that ballroom earlier, I hadn't noticed the sweeping floral arch or the golden chandeliers. What I noticed was the architecture of exclusion, the way legacy wrapped itself around power and used bloodlines as paperweights. The welcome girl with the clipboard didn't recognize me. Of course she didn't. "Name?" she asked. "Noa Moreau," I answered, calm and deliberate. Her smile faltered, just briefly, as she handed me my place card with a tight-lipped Table 19. I didn't need the map to know what that meant. Tables 1 through 6 surrounded the stage where Elle and her fiancé would bask in curated adoration. Tables 7 through 14 housed extended relatives and friends worthy of camera time. Table 19 was outside the main room, wedged beside a decorative alcove and facing a mirror, not the celebration. It wasn't just seating, it was banishment with linen napkins. I entered anyway, dressed in navy, the kind of quiet elegance that didn't ask for permission. The room sparkled, all ivory drapes and soft violin. Elle glittered at the center, radiant and adored, while my father stood near the stage, all charm and polished indifference. When his gaze skimmed past mine, it didn't even pause. Selena, the planner of this farce, greeted me with a counterfeit smile. "Noa, you made it." "Of course I did," I said. She gestured to the room. "Isn't everything perfect?" "Except the seating." Her eyes gleamed. "So many guests. Logistics, you understand." But I did understand. Everything with her was intentional. Elle appeared then, a constellation in silver. "Look at you," she said, faux warmth dripping from her lips. "So polished. You look expensive." "I wasn't joking," I replied. She brushed at her hair. "Hope you're not upset about the seating. You've always been flexible." "Flexible," I echoed. "Adaptable," she added, eyes shining. "You've always been good at fading into the background." And there it was, the truth, gift-wrapped in sugar. But I didn't flinch. I didn't rage. I just smiled. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room isn't the one you erase. It's the one who lets you believe you got away with it, until they decide it's their turn to write the story. The girl at the welcome table didn't recognize me. Of course she didn't. "Name?" she asked, eyes already scanning the guest list. "Noa Moreau," I replied, calm and measured. Her fingers paused mid-scan, her lips tightening just enough to betray discomfort. "Oh," she said, the kind of "oh" people reserve for names they didn't expect to see, or worse, hoped they wouldn't. "Right, of course." She handed me a place card with overstyled gold lettering. You're at table 19. She didn't need to tell me where that was. I'd already seen the seating chart behind her. Tables 1 through 6 formed a glowing crescent around the stage, where Elle and her fiancé would bask in spotlight. Tables 7 to 14 were filled with extended family, close friends, and photogenic connections. The rest spilled out toward the periphery, the service doors, coat racks, exits. Table 19 wasn't even inside. It was tucked beneath a decorative alcove outside the ballroom, facing not the celebration, but a gilded mirror. My name wasn't among the cherished. It was stamped on the edge of an afterthought. "Is there a mistake?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She blinked. "No, Ms. Moreau. That's your assigned seat." My chest tightened. Not from surprise, but from the dull sting of a truth I'd always known. I was present, but peripheral. Visible, but never wanted. I took the card and walked in. The ballroom was perfection. Ivory drapes cascading like waterfalls, gold-rimmed china, candlelight flickering over crystal. At the center was Elle, radiant in silver, laughter dancing on her lips as admirers orbited around her. Her fiancé stood proudly at her side, one arm possessive around her waist, the other lifting a champagne glass. I scanned the room until I found my father near the stage, deep in conversation with an investor he'd been courting since I was 12. When his gaze skimmed over mine, there was no flicker of recognition, not even a nod. I moved past clusters of guests who knew my name but never dared say it aloud. At the far end of the room stood Selena, the mastermind of this performance, draped in black silk like royalty. When she saw me approach, she smiled, the kind of smile that could slice through bone without leaving a trace. "Noa," she said, brushing the air beside my cheek. "You made it." "Of course I did," I answered. She tilted her head. "Everything's perfect, isn't it? The flowers, the music. Elle?" "Except the seating," I said evenly. Her smile didn't even twitch. "Oh, darling. We had so many guests. Logistics, you know. I'm sure it's not personal." But it was. With Selena, everything was calculated. And right on cue, Elle appeared, dripping charm like a chandelier. "Look at you," she said. "So polished. You look expensive." I wasn't joking, I replied. She laughed, all teeth and affectation. "Hope you're not upset about the seating. You know how chaotic planning is. And you've always been flexible." "Flexible," I repeated. "Adaptable," she added, eyes glittering. "You've always been good at fading into the background." There it was, the barb wrapped in silk, the truth hidden in flattery. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one you try to erase. It's the one who's finally done pretending not to notice. Tucked away in the vanity of a crumbling house time had long forgotten, I found the truth my family had worked so hard to bury. A leather-bound journal, thick with grief, love, and warnings from a mother silenced too soon. But let me take you back, to the ballroom where it all unraveled. Ella, basking in applause and draped in silver, had just turned away, convinced her victory was complete. I returned to the hallway outside, the one they had exiled me to, where table 19 stood half-hidden behind a plant, my name card gleaming like a joke. It wasn't about a seat. It was about power, legacy. Elle wasn't just the bride. She was being installed as the new heir, while I, Noa Moreau, the firstborn daughter of the original wife, the one named in trust documents and quietly omitted, was being written out. That is, until I overheard a conversation in the shadows, Elle and an older man, Charles, whispering about asset transfers, signed documents, and a clause triggered by the wedding. "And Noah?" he asked. Elle laughed, smug and blind. She's already gone. But I wasn't. I was listening, and I was done fading into the background. I left the ballroom without another glance and drove straight to the one place they thought I'd never return. My childhood home, the one my mother died in and my father never dared to sell. Inside, the air was thick with stillness, the furniture frozen in time, and in her old vanity, behind a warped drawer panel, I found what I didn't even know I'd been looking for: her journal. Page after page, she poured out everything: her fears about Veydra, the manipulation she saw creeping in, and the betrayal of a husband slipping away. But it was one entry that stopped my breath cold. I'm writing a new will. I haven't told him yet. I'm leaving everything to Noa. I need to protect her. My hands trembled as I closed the book. Proof. Not just of her love, but of a legal truth that could unravel the web Elle and Veydra had so carefully spun. They tried to erase me, but my mother made sure I could rewrite the ending. And now I will. I stared at the diary as if it were my mother's heart, still beating, still whispering. But instead of tears, I felt the burn of clarity. Clutching the journal like a torch, I stepped out of that suffocating house, its walls heavy with betrayal. There was only one person left I could trust: Aunt June. She had vanished after the funeral, slipping out of the family like a silent rebellion. No goodbyes, no accusations, just absence. I thought grief had swallowed her, but maybe she'd seen too much. I drove 3 hours through the night to her lakeside cottage. When she opened the door and saw the diary in my hands, she said nothing, just stepped aside and let me in. At her kitchen table, I laid everything out: the diary, the photos, the guest list from the engagement party. I told her about the erasure, the overheard whispers, the calculated seating chart. She listened in silence, her expression carved from stone. When I finished, she simply said, "I knew Veydra was dangerous. I didn't know she'd be this bold." "She's counting on my silence," I said. June nodded slowly. "And you're done being silent." She stood, walked to an old cabinet, and pulled out a weathered file. "Your mother gave me this," she said, placing it before me. "The original will. She made me promise to keep it safe. I never thought it would come to this." Inside was everything: my name, her signature, legal rights to her shares in the family business, the house, her personal accounts. Everything meant for me. None of it had been honored, because the will they read after her death wasn't this one. It was Veydra's forgery. "Can we challenge it?" I asked, my voice steady. June smiled faintly, something fierce in her eyes. "We can do more than that." She opened her laptop and began typing with practiced speed. "We'll need timelines, documentation, proof of manipulation, and we'll need to move before the wedding." "Why before?" "Because once Elle is married and the asset clause triggers, everything shifts legally. Right now, it's all in limbo. That's our window." 9 days. That's all we had to gather evidence and tear down the empire Veydra had built on erasure. I nodded. "I'll need help." "I'll call in some favors," June said, her tone sharp. "People who remember your mother and people who can't stand Veydra." I looked at the will, at the diary, and at the quiet strength of a woman who'd been erased but had found a way to leave a voice behind. My mother couldn't stop them in life, but I would in her name. No more sidelines. No more being polite. The thing about lies is they don't crumble on their own. They're built like walls, stone by stone, coated in silence and fear. But I had the crack. I had the proof. And now I had fire. We wouldn't break that wall with rage. We'd use paper, truth, and precision. And with June by my side, the demolition had already begun. June's grief had long since hardened into steel, But now that steel was being forged into fire. Her lakeside cottage transformed into a war room overnight. Papers taped to the walls, color-coded timelines stretching across the dining table, highlighters bleeding life into brittle legal documents. "You need to understand something," she said on the second night, her voice low as she hovered over a stack of files. Veydra's brilliance wasn't just in forging the will, it was in ensuring the original one was never seen. I leaned in, trying to make sense of the paper battlefield. "But isn't a forged will automatically invalid?" June nodded grimly. "It is. But forged doesn't always mean fake. Veydra didn't create a new document. She altered an old draft, one your mother signed under pressure, and passed it off as the final version. She removed the trust clause. She cut your inheritance language. Then, while your father was drowning in grief, she filed it quietly. No one even thought to ask questions. Because they didn't expect a fight," I said. "Exactly." That was the moment our strategy snapped into place. June reached out to a retired probate attorney who owed her a favor, a quiet man with sharp instincts who agreed to help draft an injunction should we need to halt the transfer. Time was our enemy. Veydra had scheduled the asset transfer for Elle's wedding day. Less a coincidence and more a surgical strike. It was about symbolism, yes, but more importantly, it was about sealing control. Once Elle was married, she would legally be a bound beneficiary under the manipulated will's continuity clause, a loophole that disappeared if my mother's original will was reinstated. "Your mother wanted everything to go to you directly," June explained, pointing to a section in the original document. "But Veydra's version creates a trust where she controls the assets, and Elle inherits through marriage. Legal sleight of hand. Once that wedding is official, the money is practically gone." "So, if the wedding happens, we lose?" I asked. "Not entirely," she said. "But it'll get messier. Public perception shifts. Legal battles become reputation wars. And Veydra is very good at turning silence into strategy." We had 8 days. 8 days to authenticate the will, lock in handwriting analysis, map Veydra's timeline of deceit, and prepare to strike when the room was fullest, the lights brightest, and the illusion most intact. Quiet justice wouldn't be enough. We wanted spectacle. We needed exposure. And for that, we needed allies. June brought up Simon Carr, Veydra's ex-husband, a man she had financially gutted through a shady private equity game 2 decades earlier. He'd settled out of court quietly, to avoid public embarrassment. But Simon hadn't forgotten, and judging by the speed of his reply, he'd been waiting for a chance like this. We met him at an exclusive private club, its wood-paneled quiet masking the storm we carried in with us. Simon, now silver-haired and deliberate, barely let me introduce myself. "She's doing it again, isn't she?" he asked. "She never stopped," June replied. He exhaled deeply, nodded once, and slid a folder across the table. "Everything I didn't say in court," he said. "Emails, financial records, wire transfers, even notes she left behind. I kept it all, not for revenge, just in case someone else needed it." I flipped through the file, and there it was. Veydra's signature, her fingerprints on everything. The same strategy she used to bury me mirrored in older, darker ink. And now, finally, we had proof. Proof that Veydra hadn't just rewritten one woman's legacy. She'd made a career of it. And this time, her erasure wouldn't go unchallenged. Financial records spanning years, carefully buried but now laid bare, mirrored the same strategy Veydra had used to take over our family. Create dependency, then construct a narrative so airtight, so manicured, that no one dares question her authority until it's far too late. "We're going to expose her," I said. and Simon, Veydra's ex-husband, regarded me with eyes that had already survived her brand of ambition. "Do it clean," he warned. "Don't play her game. She always bets on chaos." "I'm not here for chaos," I replied quietly. "I'm here for clarity." With his documents added to our growing arsenal, we walked away with not just evidence, but leverage. June, relentless and strategic, reached out to a journalist who had once covered my mother's philanthropic work. She agreed to run a story, if we could verify our claims. That verification came from a forensic analyst who scrutinized every inch of the documents: the original will, Veydra's doctored version, and the diary. 3 tense days later, the report landed like a gavel. The filed will contained inconsistencies in ink, line pressure, and document aging. The signature had been digitally lifted from an earlier draft. Not a crude forgery, but a precise, manipulated deception. We had proof. We had motive. We had names. What we needed now was the moment. And we chose the wedding. Not for spectacle, but because spectacle was Veydra's language. She'd orchestrated this event like a royal succession, with Elle stepping into the spotlight, inheriting not just assets, but the narrative. It was designed to cement Veydra's power. I would turn it into her undoing. June and I built the dossier like a prosecutor's case. Notarized letters, financial trails, timelines, expert reports. It was cold, professional, ironclad. But I wasn't. I felt something colder than grief, more potent than rage. Resolve. Then, June handed me a flash drive. "You'll need this too," she said. "What's on it?" I asked. "Your mother," she replied gently. "An audio journal. Just a few entries. I didn't want to tell you before, but she talks about you, about what she feared, what she hoped. She knew something like this might happen." I took it like it might shatter in my hands. That night, alone in the guest room, I pressed play. Her voice came through the headphones, lower than I remembered, softened by illness, but still full of that quiet strength. "If you're hearing this, it means I wasn't strong enough to stop what's coming. I tried, Noah. God, I tried. But if there's any part of me still left in this world, it's you. You are not invisible. You are not weak. You are my legacy, and you don't need their permission to claim what's yours." I let her words settle like iron in my lungs, and for the first time in weeks, I slept. In the morning, I called June. "Let's invite them all," I said. "The witnesses?" "No," I said. "The ghosts, the ones Veydraleft behind, the people she used, the ones who remember." June sent out the invitations. Rooms were booked, names confirmed. The house of cards was about to meet the wind. 5 days to go. That night, Veydrasent me a message. Short, icy. "I hope you've found peace with your position in this family. There's still time to choose grace." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The real reply would arrive in 5 days, under the same chandelier where they erased me. This time, I would not be erased. This time, I was the headline. I never replied to Veydra's message, but I wrote one for myself. A line I kept tucked inside my pocket like a talisman. "You stole a legacy and built an empire on ashes, but ashes remember, and this time, the fire belongs to me." I didn't send it, because this wasn't about her. It was about me. About rising without the scream, reclaiming without the plea, ending a war without becoming its monster. The will that never was would finally come to light, and with it, everything would begin again. The morning of the wedding dawned suspiciously perfect. Cloudless sky, crisp air, sunlight bouncing off the estate's polished windows like a spotlight waiting for its cue. Inside, the house was a frenzy of curated chaos. Florists whispered in corners, stylists floated from room to room with brushes like wands, and coordinators murmured commands into earpieces. The air reeked of money, roses, and perfectly staged lies. At the center of it all was Elle, descending the grand staircase like royalty cloaked in crystal and choreography. Her dress shimmered under the chandeliers, her every step calculated for admiration. Applause was built into her existence. And today, she was being crowned not just as a bride, but as the next chapter of a legacy that didn't belong to her. I watched from the sidelines, invisible by design, a silence no longer born of submission, but of strategy. Our eyes met briefly. She didn't break her smile, but the hesitation in her gaze betrayed her. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know when or how. Yet. I moved through the marble maze of chairs and centerpieces to the ballroom, which had been transformed into a cathedral of curated wealth. Gold trim on everything, floating glass orbs with flickering candles, roses stacked in towering arrangements. It screamed legacy, perfection, permanence. At the far end of the room stood Selena, architect of this illusion, queen of manipulation, overseeing every last bow and bloom with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. She saw me. She didn't speak, but her lips tightened just slightly. She was worried. Good. Then came June, sweeping in with quiet precision, flanked by Simon Carr and a small group of silent allies. People who had once stood too close to Veydra, too close to Selena, and bore the quiet scars of betrayal. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't need to. Their presence was truth enough. The plan was not about chaos. It was about control. No screaming, no dramatics. Just a shift. A quiet earthquake beneath Veydra's carefully built empire. After the ceremony, before the inheritance announcement, there would be a tribute video. Elle and Selena's masterpiece. A montage of glowing images, family milestones, childhood nostalgia, and declarations of legacy. We made a surgical edit, just a few frames, a voice, a truth, enough to rupture the lie without ever raising our voices. I took my seat, this time inside the ballroom, though still far from the stage. But I didn't care. Control isn't about where you sit. It's about where the spotlight falls when the illusion breaks. The ceremony began. Strings swelled. Elle stepped into the room like a crescendo. People gasped. Cameras clicked. Her dress shimmered like a promise. But promises built on stolen names and buried truths never shine for long. And in just a few moments, her crown would crack. Elle's smile could have melted steel as she glided down the aisle, a woman entirely wrapped in her own mythology. Theo stood waiting at the altar, striking in a navy tuxedo, his face unreadable. He had always seemed one step behind her, dazzled by the brilliance without seeing the wires behind the curtain. But today, something in his stillness suggested doubt. The vows unfolded like a script, every word polished and pre-approved, ending in the inevitable. I do. Applause. A kiss. Noa Moreau was now Elle Carr, and the ballroom erupted, glasses raised, music soared, laughter echoed through gilded walls. No one noticed the slow tide shifting beneath them. Selena took the stage with the poise of a queen addressing her court. Her voice rang out, clear and bright, as she toasted love, legacy, and the future. Effective immediately, she announced. We will be transferring the Moreau family estate into joint ownership under Mr. and Mrs. Carretera. Not just a gift, but a gesture of trust and continuity. More applause. Cameras flashed. Then the screen behind her flickered. At first, it mimicked the wedding montage. Elle and Theo, childhood clips, soft transitions. But the colors dimmed. The music stopped. A black screen, then a voice. "If you're hearing this, it means I wasn't strong enough to stop what's coming." My mother's voice. Raw. Honest. The room went still. Vera's posture stiffened. Ella's brows drew together, confused. Then came the images. Side-by-side comparisons of two wills. One authentic, one doctored. Forensic notes followed. Signature overlays. Then the financial records, transfers. And finally, grainy footage of Vera speaking to her lawyer. "It's simple. We bypassed the original. She signed a draft under pressure. We filed that one. Noa won't contest it. She's too polite." The ballroom didn't gasp. It exhaled, slowly, like a collective confirmation of long-held suspicion. The screen faded to black. Silence. Then June took the stage, poised as ever. "I'm June Moreau," she said, "executor of Annalise Moreau's estate. What you've just seen has been authenticated by legal and forensic experts. The true will left everything to Noa Moreau, her only biological child. That will was never honored." She stepped aside, and I walked forward. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I stood in the center of the very room that had tried to erase me and let the weight of the truth settle like dust on crystal. My father wouldn't meet my gaze. Theo looked at Ella, and then, without a word, stepped away from her. Vera tried to recover, voice tight. "This is clearly a misunderstanding," she insisted. "An act of desperation. We have legal—" But Simon Carr emerged from the crowd. "Vera," he said gently, "you forged a will." Her face turned ghost pale. "I have proof," he added, "and I'm not the only one." One by one, others stepped forward. Quiet, certain. The empire built on ashes had finally met its match, the fire that remembered. Each person who stepped forward that night carried a sliver of truth. Receipts, records, testimonies. Tiny blades slicing through the illusion Vera had spent years constructing. For a moment she stood frozen, her carefully managed facade cracking under the weight of exposure. Then she turned to Elle, desperate. But Elle snapped, her voice shaking with blame. "This is your fault," she said, pointing at me, her tone shrill. "You always hated me. You couldn't stand that they loved me more. This isn't about the will. It's about you being petty, jealous, small." I tilted my head slightly, the way you might when watching something unravel that no longer surprises you. "Is that what you tell yourself?" I asked calmly. She lunged, fury in every step, but Theo moved between us, his voice like a wall. "Stop." She froze. He turned to me quietly. "Is it true?" I held his gaze. "Yes." He nodded, then turned to Elle, the hurt in his eyes sharp and clear. "I asked you if Noa would be included. You said she didn't want it." Elle stammered. "She didn't. She never fought for it." "I'm fighting now," I said. And just like that, the string snapped. Ella collapsed, the sobs erupting without polish or performance. Raw, guttural cries that shattered the image she'd spent a lifetime cultivating. She looked to our father. "Dad?" But he didn't move, didn't even blink, and Vera, reaching instinctively for her poise, found nothing. The room had turned. It no longer belonged to her. I stepped down from the stage. No microphone, no fanfare. Just the truth, and for once, it was enough. The collapse wasn't loud. It was slow, quiet, the way families fall apart after pretending too long that everything's fine. The energy shifted after the final video frame. First a flicker of confusion, then a cold, collective realization. No one screamed. No one shattered a glass. But no one would ever see Vera or Elle the same again. Guests whispered differently now. No longer fawning, but cautious, skeptical. Elle disappeared after Theo walked away. Vera tried to follow, But Simon Carr stopped her with a few soft-spoken words that drained the last trace of color from her face. She said nothing more that night. June delivered a statement to the press, precise and final. The estate transfer is under injunction. All rights are being re-examined under the original will. I stood near the farthest column, still in that navy dress, uncelebrated, untouched, yet everything had changed. This time, they all saw me. Not as the forgotten one, not as a shadow, but as the woman who brought down the room. I walked out before the DJ played a single note, before the guests finished their drinks, before anyone could ask for my side. I didn't need their whispers. I'd heard them my entire life. Now, someone else would be their scandal. Back at June's cottage, we said little. She poured red wine, and we sat barefoot in her kitchen, surrounded by the soft weight of a storm that had finally passed. "You did it," she said. "No," I replied. "We did." She smiled, tired but sharp. "This isn't the end. Vera will fight." I sipped my wine. She already lost. She just doesn't know how to lose quietly. And June didn't argue. The next 48 hours unfolded as expected. Headlines sharp enough to slice reputations. Heiress reclaims estate in shocking wedding reveal. Socialite under fire for forged will. Noa Moreau steps out of the shadows. I ignored every article. Let them talk. What mattered wasn't the noise, but the silence that followed. The kind that lingers when people who once controlled the story have finally been cut off from the microphone. Elle never came home. Vera went silent, dodging every call from the board of trustees. And my father. He called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead, his voice stripped of its usual sternness, replaced with something quieter. Tired. "Noah, I suppose I owe you more than an apology. I don't know what to say. I let things happen. Things I shouldn't have. I didn't protect you. I didn't protect your mother's memory. If there's any way I can make this right, please let me." I deleted it without hesitation. Words, after years of silence, no longer earned redemption. 2 days later, he came to June's. He didn't knock, just stood in the garden like a man unsure if he was still allowed near the door. I watched him through the window before stepping onto the porch. He looked smaller, his shoulders hunched, his suit wrinkled, his pride gone. "Noah," he said. Just that. I didn't respond. "I know I can't undo what happened," he continued, "but I want to understand." I met his gaze, steady and sharp. "You stood beside her," I said. "You let her erase Mom's name from her own legacy. You watched her reduce me to a footnote, and you said nothing." His jaw tightened. "I was afraid. I was a child," I said, "and I still fought harder than you did." He flinched like the truth stung. "You're right. I waited. I let Vera rewrite the story because it was easier than facing what I'd failed to protect. I thought if I just kept pretending, maybe it would become true." "And now?" I asked. "Now I know truth claws its way back, no matter how long it takes." Silence fell between us. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just want to know you again, if you'll let me." I looked at him, the man who once lifted me onto his shoulders at the fair, who once tried to braid my hair after my mother died, who later vanished into the fog of another woman's shadow. A piece of me wanted to reach for that version of him, but that version was long gone. "I don't know if there's room for you in my life anymore," I said quietly. His eyes shone, but he nodded. "I understand." And then he turned away, not with pride or defiance, but with quiet acceptance, like a man finally realizing what it means to be on the outside of a life he once took for granted. The next week unfolded in a blur of legal maneuvers. June filed the official petition to reinstate my mother's original will. With Simon's documents, the forensic analysis, and Veydra's voice recorded in her own betrayal, the judge issued an injunction within 3 days. The estate was frozen. The board removed Veydra as acting trustee. I was appointed interim manager until the formal hearing. It was surreal. The same people who once ignored me, misnamed me, dismissed me, now addressed me with cautious respect. Ms. Moreau. They waited for my decisions, asked for input, but the power didn't thrill me. What did was the silence. Veydra didn't issue a statement. No press spin, no denial. She was still. She was waiting. She'll counter, June warned. She always does. Let her, I said. This time she'll be playing defense. And Elle? Nothing. No photos. No posts. No charming captions to drown the truth. Theo issued a cold, calculated statement. Due to recent developments, we are re-evaluating our legal and personal commitments. He didn't even say her name. 2 days after the estate freeze, a letter arrived. From Elle. Handwritten, pages long. A cyclone of denial, guilt, and venom. You were always jealous of me. I didn't know about the will. Veydra was just doing what she thought was right. You ruined my wedding day. I hope it was worth it. I didn't finish it. I didn't need to. Because at last, for the first time in my life, what Elle thought didn't matter. Not anymore. The family I once longed to belong to, the one I bent myself to fit into, hoping for scraps of affection, was nothing more than a gilded fiction, built on image, maintained through fear, and bound by the silence of those too afraid to speak the truth hiding beneath its polished surface. It took years, but now the illusion had shattered. Because real families protect you. Real families remember you. Real families don't erase you. Over the following 2 weeks, June and I unraveled the mess Veydra had spent years crafting. A tangle of silent asset transfers, buried clauses, and hidden trusts, all pointing to a single truth. Veydra had prepared her exit like a queen abandoning a sinking ship. She just never imagined I'd be the one standing at the gates when she tried to leave. On a quiet Tuesday morning, I sat in the boardroom of Moreau Holdings, flanked by lawyers and auditors, as I signed the final documents naming me the rightful successor trustee. The room clapped. June squeezed my hand. But what I felt wasn't triumph. It was like attending the funeral of the girl I used to be. That night, back at June's, I stood on the porch, tea in hand, stars blinking above. I don't feel victorious, I said. June joined me, draping a shawl over her shoulders. Because you didn't win, she replied. You reclaimed. I paused. Is there a difference? She sipped her tea. Winning is about defeating someone. Reclaiming is remembering who you were before they convinced you that you were nothing. I let her words settle like truth in my bones. They never loved me, I whispered. June didn't deny it. Instead, she asked, But do you love you? I didn't answer. Not yet. Healing, after all, doesn't happen in court. It happens in the silence left behind when the battle is over. A full year passed. 1 orbit of the sun, enough for the scandal to die down, the headlines to fade, the silence to start sounding like peace. In that time, everything shifted. Veydra was stripped from every board, every charity, every curated seat of power. Charges didn't come as a storm. They arrived like slow rain. Civil fraud, manipulation, misappropriation of charitable funds, unethical control of a trust. She pled not guilty, of course. Veydra always believed appearances mattered more than outcomes. But this time, her illusion couldn't hold. Her name vanished from programs and plaques. No one answered her calls. She wasn't feared anymore. She was forgotten. As for Elle, she disappeared. After Theo filed for annulment, she issued a final PR-crafted statement. I was misled. I'm focusing on healing. But no one bought it. Her Instagram went dark. Her face stopped showing up at galas. Rumors whispered she fled to Italy for a wellness retreat. I never confirmed. What mattered most wasn't where she went. It was that I stopped checking. I stopped needing to know. Because sometimes looking back isn't remembering. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. When the estate was finally settled, I didn't cling to it. I sold what Veydra had built. Vacation homes, city penthouses, blood-soaked assets of a legacy I never wanted. And I bought one thing back. My mother's house. The old one. The porch still creaked. The kitchen window still jammed. But I didn't restore it. I repurposed it. It became Eden House, a haven for women who, like me, had been erased by families, partners, systems that called their pain inconvenient. We offer housing, legal aid, and career rebuilding. Not charity, not pity, power. June serves as counsel. I live in the apartment upstairs. It's simple, quiet, real. Each morning I drink coffee on the balcony, listening to laughter rise from below. It's the sound of women beginning again. It's better than applause. Months later, an email arrived. Subject line: request for interview. The woman who rewrote her family. A journalist wanted to feature me, called it inspirational. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing the laptop, because this was never about me. This story belongs to every girl pushed to the edge of the photo, every woman who kept silent at dinner tables, waiting to be seen, every daughter told to be smaller so someone else could shine. My story isn't about erasure. It's about refusing to stay erased. My mother once said, "Legacies aren't inherited, they're created." I never understood her until I watched mine unravel, until I realized I didn't want theirs. I wanted mine. Not revenge, not validation, freedom. I kept her diary. Her voice rests in my drawer, quiet and sure. On still nights, I read it, not for pain, but for grounding. To remember that I survived, that I mattered, even when they swore I didn't. There's a photo on my bookshelf now, not staged, not curated, just me, June, and the first 3 residents of Eden House, mid-laughter, takeout boxes everywhere, wine too expensive to justify. The frame is crooked, the lighting's terrible, but I've never looked more like myself. That's the legacy I choose. And when my father wrote again, months after the hearing, no apology, just a line: "I see you now. I just wish I had seen you then." I didn't reply, but I folded it gently and tucked it into the back of my mother's diary. Not to forgive, not to forget, but to mark the moment the silence finally broke. The people who walk through the doors of Eden House every day are the ones I carry forward. Because if you've ever felt like the forgotten one, cropped out, silenced, seated behind the pillar, then hear this. You don't need to fight for a seat at someone else's table. You can build your own. Make it wide, make it warm, and make sure no one ever feels invisible at it again. That's how you rewrite a legacy. That's how you reclaim a life. And choosing yourself? That isn't selfish. It's survival. Because life doesn't always shatter with fury. Sometimes it unravels in quiet places, between family smiles, in the empty chair, in the memories rewritten without you. Noa Moreau's story is not a tale of revenge. It is a testament to reclamation, a journey from erasure to emergence, from invisible to undeniable. And beneath every courtroom victory and every carefully measured reveal, there lies something more essential: the profound courage to choose oneself when no one else will. Noah's life reflects a truth many know but few say aloud. that sometimes families aren't built on love, but on performance. And stepping off that stage is the first step toward freedom. From the beginning, she was told her presence was too much, too inconvenient. She wasn't cast out violently. She was erased with care. The kind of quiet dismissal that makes you question your own memory. Did I really matter less? Or am I just imagining it? That doubt lingers deeper than wounds. For years, Noa lived in that liminal space, obedient, composed, quietly carrying the weight of being unchosen. Her greatest rebellion wasn't rage, it was restraint. She didn't burn the house down. She rebuilt the one her mother left behind, stone by stone, truth by truth. Because sometimes, the most powerful response to being silenced is clarity. She didn't confront Veydra and Elle for drama or spectacle. She did it to restore her mother's voice, to reclaim the legacy that was meant for her. Not for wealth, not for applause, but because someone, somewhere, once whispered, "You matter." And that whisper was enough. That was her first act of power, honoring what was right, not proving others wrong. Her second act was silence, not submission, but refusal. Refusal to perform the emotional labor expected of her. She didn't beg her father for acknowledgement. She didn't argue when accused of jealousy. She simply stepped out of the frame. In a world that conditions women to be agreeable to be accepted, Noa's greatest rebellion was her calm, unwavering refusal to play along. She walked away, not from strangers, but from blood, from the hope that one day they would see her. And that hope, that ache of waiting to be chosen, was the last thing she had to let go of. When her father came, not with pride but apology, it was too late. Regret, while real, is not repair. And Noa, standing in her full self, gave him the truth. Silence isn't neutral. It is complicity. And his silence had cost her too much. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She named what had been done. And sometimes that is justice. Even then, she didn't seek to destroy the people who hurt her. She exposed the lie and stepped back. No vengeance, just undeniable proof and a quiet departure. Because justice, in her hands, was never about spectacle. It was about restoration. After the estate was returned to her, after Veydra fell from grace and Elle vanished into silence, Noa didn't cling to the empire. She let it go, sold off the pieces soaked in betrayal, and with what remained she returned home, not to the penthouse, but to the house her mother had loved. She didn't restore it. She rebirthed it. Eden House became a sanctuary for women who had been erased, diminished, overlooked. Not charity, but dignity. Not shelter, but sovereignty. June became her counsel. Noa lived above the center. It wasn't grand. It was hers. And for the first time, the only eyes she needed on her were her own. When the interview request came, the woman who rewrote her family, she didn't answer. Because her story wasn't about becoming the headline. It was about building something quietly powerful. A life not defined by trauma, but by transformation. This story is for every person who has ever waited to be seen, who asked for so little, just space, just truth, and was met with silence. It's for the daughters who sat at the edge of the photo, for the women who believed that if they sacrificed enough, smiled enough, stayed small enough, maybe they'd be allowed to stay. Noa's story doesn't end with revenge or redemption. It ends with peace. Not perfect, but earned. Not loud, but lasting. And in that peace, she teaches us the final truth. Choosing yourself is not about proving your worth. It's about knowing it. It's stepping away from the doors that never opened and building your own. And when you do, you don't need anyone else's permission to walk through.